Miami Hurricanes have 16 recruits coming in for official visits this weekend. But out of those 16, is this one the number one target?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Could a player from Alabama be the top target for Miami out of the 16 players visiting this weekend? I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and writer for allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With the recruiting overlord about to join us, he is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. On this episode, we're going to talk about the most important positions for Miami to address in recruiting in the class of 2025. Want to talk about what would happen if Miami actually wins on the field this year, because Cristobal has recruited really well already, despite the wins not being there. But yeah, I want to talk about these weekend targets, and we have the man himself, Brian Smith, recruiting expert here on the Locked On Podcast Network with us. And Brian, I want to start with Zion Grady, edge rusher out of Enterprise High School in Alabama, 4-star, 6'4", 235 pounds. Now, I'm not saying he's the most important target in this class, but he might be the most important target this weekend, because Grady, he has received a Fong bomb prediction a few weeks ago. Steve Wiltfong predicted Zion Grady, who's a former Alabama commit who backed off of that when Saban retired. Steve Wiltfong a few weeks ago predicted Grady to land at Miami. He's got that official visit coming up this weekend. What does Miami need to do to close the deal?
The visit is everything. This is a kid from South Alabama, originally committed to Alabama. They kind of messed up the recruitment with the coaching change, but now they're back in it. Auburn has went all in on him. Georgia wants him. So this is about as highly contested as it gets. It does help to have Jason Taylor recruiting him, a Hall of Famer, but at the same time, they're the outlier amongst the group. So the visit has to be everything. Curious to see if he comments afterwards what he liked about Miami, how he contrasts it to the other schools, because, you know, the SEC schools are a different lifestyle, et cetera, and Miami's in a big city. So this is going to be a really interesting recruitment.
Yeah, I've also heard Florida State mentioned as a team that likes him, which would be interesting if it could maybe come down to Miami versus Florida State for one of the number 6 rated player in Alabama.
Well, Florida State recruits Alabama pretty hard. Yeah, so it's possible, and it's a lot closer to Tallahassee. So he's maybe 2.5, 3 hours away from Tallahassee where he lives. So it's not a shocker if that happens. But really good edge player, could play linebacker, could be just pure pass rusher. Pretty much has his pick of schools.
Now, he's also got 2 teammates from Enterprise who's visiting with him this weekend at Miami. 4-star linebacker Eric Winters, 3-star cornerback Andrew Purcell. Now, one thing is you've hung around these guys a little bit, Brian. Like, how close are they? Is there a chance that wherever one of them goes, maybe there could be a package deal with 2 or 3 of them, or could they all end up going their separate ways?
Zion transferred to Enterprise a little later on. The other kids, to my knowledge, have been there longer, but they're friends. I don't know Purcell. I do know Eric. Like, Winters, great kid. Zion's real chill. They would like it, but I think they're making their own decisions. When you have schools like Bama, Florida State, and Miami, you got to make your own decision. But Winters fancies himself as a hybrid safety guy. How his recruitment works out might have to do with that. Like, Auburn's willing to give him a shot at like that nickel spot. So how teams value them, it's just different for each kid. So the Purcell kid is the one that's unique. His recruitment really started to rise. And when I went to the high school this spring, it was the same day, ironically, that Taylor was there. That's a kid, he said, this kid's going to blow up. And he was right. Head coach was completely right. His recruitment is now on that border where he can get an offer from pretty much anybody. So maybe Miami gets him, and that helps with the other 2 kids. There's so many different scenarios with this. It's really interesting.
Yeah, as I was studying the last couple days, this list of 16 players just this weekend that are coming in to visit Miami, I've had the opportunity to research some players that I didn't know a whole lot about, and one of those is four-star edge rusher Javeon Campbell, 6'5", 265 out of Frankfort, Kentucky. This kid is huge. Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Kentucky, all in the mix for him. So a bunch of SEC schools, and then Miami getting that official visit from him this weekend. What can you tell me about Javeon Campbell and where Miami might stand here?
Because he's from an area and a program that's not normal, his recruitment didn't get a lot of publicity. His rankings didn't get a lot of publicity until a little later on. It's harder to rate him too because, like you said, he's a very big kid. And at the level he's playing, most kids, they can't handle him. So it's really hard to rate his film too. I think he's going to be a 3-tech. He's already over 260. He's not going to play on the edge, in my opinion. That's okay. Miami's history is full of guys like this that were 250, 260 that ended up being 290 and being 3-techs and getting drafted. So look at the offer lists, look at the official visit list. Talent is there. Now the question is, can you get him when you're the only non-SEC school? I mean, you got to look at trends. It's 1 out of 5, but I don't know. He had offers from everybody, Michigan and Notre Dame and all kinds of schools up north offered him all the way to Miami. So Miami's getting him on campus. That's all you can really ask. And they have made a humongous priority on the linemen on both sides of the ball, as you and I have talked about. So I highly doubt they're going to shy away from trying to convince him this weekend this is the place for you.
So let's go to the defensive backfield. And one of the players who's coming this weekend for a visit is a native of New Iberia, Louisiana, and he's a current LSU verbal commit. Now, when I see that, I'm like, okay, this guy's committed to LSU. He's from LSU territory. Are we sure we even want to bring him down? And I'm talking about 4-star cornerback Jaboree Antoine. But then you recall Miami's got themselves a Cajun defensive coordinator, Lance Guidry, who is very aggressive in recruiting, his home state in that area of the country. For what it's worth, Miami's offensive coordinator, probably not as involved in the recruitment of a cornerback, but of course, Shannon Dawson is another Cajun coordinator on the offensive side of the football. And so, I'm wondering, Brian, if anybody can get this 4-star cornerback from Louisiana to decommit from LSU, maybe Miami could be the team that convinces him to go south.
I was just texting with somebody about him that lives pretty close to him. He's a great player, and it's a kid LSU targeted early in the cycle. What does that tell you? LSU doesn't have to be real picky, but they are typically because it's LSU. They take some developmental guys. This is a guy that didn't think it was developmental. Like, he can come in and play. Getting him on campus is huge. LSU is hemorrhaging as a defensive football team, which makes no sense, by the way. That should never be the case. Yeah. They're horrible on defense. I don't understand it. I watched their spring game. It was hard. You have a chance here because I personally think LSU will flop this fall compared to expectations because their defense is still bad. Why would you want to go play in that? Obviously, Miami's defense is pretty darn good. He could be the guy that gets us over the hump, and that's what they're going to sell. Corner, in my opinion, is Miami's biggest weakness because they don't have a number one guy that can take away the big-bodied elite receivers. They got some guys on roster could develop into that, but they haven't proven it. Here's your chance to get another kid on campus that could do that. He's got offers from everybody. Love his athleticism, his length, his height. Big recruitment from Miami. Might be, you could make an argument for this kid. If you didn't say Zion, this kid might be the most important kid. Because number one corners are rare, man. Yeah, it's just hard to find them. You need as many bullets in the gun as possible when you go into battle. So if you can get him on campus, maybe you can get him to flip. It may not be this weekend. It's hard to flip LSU commits that are in-state guys. But I love Miami's effort.
We're only getting started here with the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, because I still want to talk about another top Miami target, Tyler Williams, receiver who's visiting this weekend. I want to talk about a West Coast edge rusher, Hayden Lowe. Can Miami convince him to come east? And there's another Louisiana area corner I want to talk about. But when we come back, I want to ask Brian Smith, what happens if Miami actually wins this year? Because, again, Mario Cristobal has recruited really well the past couple of cycles, despite things not being up to par on the field. So what happens if things are up to par this year? My friends, we're only getting started. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, there's a reason why the Game Time app is the only ticket service that I use because you're getting the best deals. You're getting amazing deals weeks and months out from an event, but you're getting even better deals the closer you get to that event. That's part of the magic of Game Time, my friends. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee make Game Time the service that takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And guys, I'm looking at great deals in my area. Florida Panthers, they're still in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're tied at 2 with the New York Rangers. The next home game is going to be Game 6 on Saturday. You can get tickets starting at $223 for the Eastern Conference Finals. If you want to watch Leo Messi and Inter Miami on Saturday, $88 tickets for St. Louis City at Inter Miami. So you can check those out at Game Time. Guys, the views from your seat are a game changer. Right on the app, they give you panoramic views from your seat before you buy those tickets. And the Game Time guarantee means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now also available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. It's called Locked On Sports Today, and it's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. We have the recruiting overlord, Brian Smith, with us. So, Brian, Miami 5-7 in 2022, and then they got a top 7 class of 2023 in recruiting right after that. 7-6 in 2023. They get a top 4 recruiting class after that. What happens if they actually produce the results on the field this year that a lot of us think that they can with Cam Ward at quarterback this year?
I think it would be more back end of the recruiting cycle, which is fine. But you would see results based on kids that have committed elsewhere or still in the process of figuring it out. Or maybe it's a kid that Miami sees during this season that they like, that they would have more cachet with because they're a top 10 team. That matters. And Miami had good recruiting classes when they, quite honestly, didn't finish the way they should have the last couple of years. So your point is very valid. Now you got to prove it, though. And on the other side, if they don't do well this year, it's year 3. It's going to really hurt them. So it is. You have to win this year. I don't care if they have 50 injuries. Got to do it anyway. That's not fair, but that's how they're going to be judged. So Miami needs to win. It's going to be feast or famine with the recruits. And you know what? That's the way football has always been. Makes it fascinating. And you're dealing with 17-year-olds. They make emotional decisions anyway. So if Miami goes 9-3 or better, it'd be hard for me to see them being outside the top 10 in recruiting, and top 5 is not out of the question either.
Okay, so I just asked you how important 12 games are going to be in recruiting. What about one game, Brian? Because Miami happens to open up their season against an in-state rival, right? Like they open up against Florida. Florida and Miami are going to be competing for a lot of players, including DJ Pickett. Like DJ Pickett will probably be at that game. That's someone that Miami and Florida are both in the mix for. In your experience, how much of a difference can one rivalry game make when it comes to recruits who are considering both schools?
I think it's subjective to each kid. That's first off. There is no overarching answer. But if you're a player that's a lineman and Miami's D-line annihilates Florida's offensive line, that's going to impact your decision, or at least you would think so. If you're a kid that just looks at the game from a perspective, okay, how competitive is Miami? Tough environment. I mean, the Swamp, I've been there. I don't know if you have. That place is bananas. And their fan base is pretty crazy. So if you go there and win, you're going to get some cachet. Also, you're going to have a lot of kids on campus that you're recruiting, that Florida is too. If you go in there and win, that's going to help you, man. I mean, they have eyeballs. Seeing it live is different. So I think it could be a big part of it. Because think about how many times these two schools bang heads just in the South, not just Florida, but Georgia, North Carolina, Mississippi, anywhere they can bang heads. It's going to happen. And I'm sure that this gets brought up in private conversations with the coaching staff. Look, I guarantee it. It's just part of human nature. There's going to be negative recruiting if you beat them. Hey, why go play for them? We're better than they are. We went to their house. Yeah, it matters.
That is well said. Brian Smith, the recruiting expert of the Locked On Network, is with us. He's also my colleague, by the way, at allhurricanes.com. And for those who check out that website every day, allhurricanes.com, we're going to have some parts of this conversation on that website a little bit later on today. So a player, Brian, that Miami has absolutely made this player a priority. And he said so in a recent interview. He was actually talking with our old colleague, Luke Cheney, and he talked about what a priority Miami has made him feel like. That's 3-star wide receiver Tyler Williams out of Sumner High School in Riverview, Florida. Now, it's funny because he's rated 3 stars, but this seems to be a player that Miami values like a 4-star. Like sometimes the scouting from the actual coaching staffs do not match up with what the recruiting, so-called experts will think about players. So what's your scouting report, Brian, on wide receiver Tyler Williams? And do you think he's underrated the way Miami's staff seems to think he's underrated?
He wasn't as big last year as he is now. He hit a little weight growth spurt. He was maybe 6 foot. Now he's like 6'2", 195 pounds. He was $180. He looks totally different. I even talked to him about that recently when I ran into him at the OT7 event. I think he's really good too. He already had speed, but now he's a grown man that can play the boundary spot or play outside. And his offer list has started to take off too. Miami got on him earlier than some other schools with what he was able to do, and now the physical size being added. Yeah, there's no reason to think he's not one of the top receivers in the country. Plays just outside Tampa. He's a kid that goes and competes all the time. He's not afraid of competition. Miami's staff loves that. Yeah, he's a top player, man. He's a top player.
That's good to hear that. A couple players from Miami Central are going to be visiting this weekend. Now, we talk about Floyd Boucard, who's like he just transferred to Central. So like he doesn't have a personal relationship with Ruben Bain and Armando Blunt, but he does appreciate, where they came from, because he did mention that, did Boucard, the 3-star defensive tackle, in a recent interview, like, hey, I'd like to get to know these guys. Maybe an opportunity to be teammates with them at Miami would be interesting. So Boucard is visiting this weekend. So is 3-star linebacker Ezekiel Marcelin. What are you hearing about their recruitment so far? And obviously Marcelin's a South Florida kid. Boucard isn't really. So I think his recruitment is more all over the place right now.
Yeah, I was looking at Boucard's arguably the most unique kid in the country. His official visit list kind of explains it too, because he's not from this country. He's from Canada, played in Mobile last year. Now he's at Miami. His visit list is Hurricanes, Oklahoma Sooners, Southern Cal Trojans, Bama, in that order. I mean, that's all over the country. Yeah. So
the big time programs too.
Yeah. I don't feel comfortable picking anything. Miami's, but most people will, because it's a local school. But is it to Floyd? I don't know. Really. And I've met him, and he's a great kid, but with the offers he has and with the way NIL works, I wouldn't touch this from a betting perspective on where this kid's going. Very difficult, especially D tackles are so coveted anyway. And he was tremendous at the Under Armour event earlier this spring in Miami. I have a feeling that his recruitment is going to drag out a while. And he falls into the category that a lot of people don't like. I could care less if he commits anywhere this summer. This is a signing day deal, because the NIL and all that, this won't end until signing day.
What about Ezekiel Marcelin?
That one, I would think, if Miami really, really wants that kid, he's always been around. He's a good kid, by the way. Always been around the program a lot. He's from South Florida. I don't see that not happen. He's a local kid. He's not somebody moved in from Canada. That should be Miami. If he's truly a focal point, that should be Miami. From just the little I've spoken with him. I know he has a lot of other offers, but now the question is, what's the pecking order? Are they trying to get somebody else instead of him? All those little political things that get into recruiting. That's the question. Could he commit today? I don't know. That's what it comes down to, because he's got a lot of offers. So recruiting is funny that way. How much love are you showing him? I'm almost surprised he hasn't committed already, which gives me pause. It's surprising.
Yeah.
He's a kid that had an offer pretty early, if I remember correctly. So why hasn't he committed to Miami?
What about 4-star edge Hayden Lowe, who's 6'4", 242 pounds? Now he plays at a private school in California, which actually it happens to be the same high school that Kayvon Thibodeau went to, who signed with Mario Cristobal at Oregon. So, hopefully that relationship, I don't know if he and Thibodeau know each other, but the high school connection is there. And Miami seems to be battling Oregon, USC, UCLA, and Texas for him. So this is another one. His recruitment is primarily out west.
This is another random recruitment when you look at the visits. It's like, man, all over the place. That program's had multiple top 10 prospects over the years. Jimmy Clausen went there. They've had kids go to SC, UCLA, Washington, all over the place. Really good high school football program. He could be a strong side end, could be a defensive tackle. Again, D linemen get more recruiting attention. There's not enough of them. I think Miami's got a shot, but like looking at his list, again, I have no idea where he's going to end up. Just a really good football player, though. And relationships are something I also mentioned a lot on this show, Alex. Cristobal, obviously, and some of his staff, too, know that program, know that area of Los Angeles well. Maybe that pays dividends for Miami. So if you're going to get back to the top, these are the kind of recruitments you got to win. They did in the 80s and 90s. They always got kids like this. Can they do it again?
Another Louisiana player. It doesn't look like Louisiana schools are really in the mix for cornerback Aiden Anding. It seems like Texas and Arkansas. Arkansas seems to be the trending leader, are the primary competition for Miami there. Aiden Anding from Ruston, Louisiana. I know this is a multi-talented guy, plays basketball, runs track, plays football. Where do you think Miami stands here?
I like the chances because LSU's not after him. Straight up.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And you've got multiple guys on UM staff that have ties to the Bayou State. Both coordinators, ironically. It's kind of weird that it's that way, but they both do. And you also have a scenario, I think there's a couple other guys on the staff that do.
Yes. Dennis Smith
that's
is
what
from
I thought.
Louisiana.
It's somebody else, too. Dennis obviously is a big deal because he's such a good recruiter. Miami needs corners, man. He's a long, athletic kid, and Ruston's a very good high school football program traditionally. It's a school LSU usually recruits for reference. I like it, and I'll take Louisiana kids all day. Those kids play so hard. It's incredible. Their per capita to the NFL rate is off the charts. So anytime you can get long, athletic corners and they're Louisiana kid, I'm down with that.
Coming up next, Miami does have two running backs visiting this weekend, a local and a non-local, and ironically, they may have a better chance with the non-local right now. Plus, want to talk about the biggest roster needs Miami needs to fill with this recruiting class. Class of 2025, my friends. Hurricanes have 16 official visitors on campus starting tomorrow. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch each and every day. By the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Brian, 2 years ago, class of 2023, it was the year of the offensive line for Miami, landing multiple 5 stars. Class of 2024 was the year of the D-line, landing multiple 5 stars on the defensive line. What do you think class of 2025 should be the year of what for Mario Cristobal?
I mean, they need it to be the corner class is what they need. I don't know if that'll happen. It's not the greatest year in the state of Florida for corners, but there are certainly several of them. That's what it needs to happen. Right now, they're just in on so many guys. It could be another position, and they do really well, corner too. Right now, I would be surprised if Miami doesn't sign a top 10 class. That's first thing to note. Secondly, they're in on so many D linemen again. It wouldn't shock me if it was another good D line class. Like you get Javeon Campbell or something to add to some of the local kids. You're in on Randy Adarica, Boucard, etc. They got a chance at another great D line class. There's nothing wrong with that. So I would guess that it's going to kind of play itself out in its own way. And the one spot that I'm curious about that they're, I guess, taking a high risk at is receiver. They're really going after the elite of the elite kids. That could be feast or famine. I mean, they had a good receiver class last year, so I get it. But I thought that approach was unique. I don't know if they're going to get Dallas Wilson or Jamie French or, Vernell Brown. Like, there's a long way to go with these recruitments, but those kids can pick their schools. So good for Miami for going all in, but that's one that is just so random. Right now, if I had to guess, I'd say D-line, though, because they got two of them prime guys that are local. That helps.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Some running back, we've talked about it on this show, Brian, and Hurricanes have two visiting this weekend. And ironically, I feel like maybe they have a better chance with the out-of-state guy, and that's Shekai Mills-Knight from Baylor School in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who is 6'1", 217 pounds. So he definitely fits the profile of the big back that Miami is looking for to complement Gerard Pringle. They also have Byron Louis visiting, and Byron Louis, who's from American Heritage, so this is the local guy. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday, Brian, that I think that out of the players Miami really needs to impress this weekend, I would think I put Byron Louis at or near the top of that list, because the trends seem to be going very much back and forth between Miami and Florida State for him. And just keeping in mind where he goes to high school, going to American Heritage, what an important pipeline that should be to Miami. Obviously, Florida State does very well with American Heritage players as well over the years. But I don't know. I'm wondering what's going on there. But do you think Miami would be in very good shape if they can land either of those two?
Both those guys can play. Both of them are good kids. They're fun to communicate with. And they're the downhill back that fits Miami's scheme. Let's be honest. They want to be a true power team, much to the chagrin of some Miami fans. They want them to throw it even more, but I disagree. You got to be able to run the football if you're going to beat the Georgias and Alabamas and stuff in the playoff. You have to. You're not just going to throw it. You got to be balanced. And these guys can take the pounding because they already have the size.
Yeah.
They're already 200 plus pounds. I don't know if a lot of people know enough about Shekai. He's pretty nimble too. Like the Baylor School is a boarding school in Chattanooga. It's right on the edge of Alabama, and they beat the bejesus out of a lot of people. He's one of the reasons why. He runs over a guy, runs around another, and outruns everybody else. That's always good. They need two running backs in this class. If one of them's going to be a bigger back is my guess, and then one can kind of be that combo slot guy, which seems to be their MO. I think they would do great to get either one. Byron, obviously, Florida State, Miami, that's a battle that's been going on for 50 years. That's not going to change. So I don't know where he's going to go. And I talked to him about as much as anybody. I think he wants to take the visits. Wisconsin's kind of a wild card there is too.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, like he's probably going to take a visit there. What the last I knew, I haven't talked to him the last week or so, but I'm curious because I thought he was going to be an early commit to Miami. Then he didn't. He wants to take visits. Again, the timing matters because there's only so many spots. It's not who you want, it's who you would, and they're also ready to commit. Those decisions, man, those political decisions for Mario and every other coach in America are very, very difficult.
Yeah, I was having a conversation recently with a friend of mine who doesn't really pay attention to recruiting. He's a big Miami fan, but he's not a big recruiting guy. And he's like, well, hold on. Well, how come, like, if you give a player an offer, how come they can't just commit? But it's this weird political thing where, and this is not 100%. Just a Miami thing, when a player gets an offer, that doesn't necessarily mean, commit to us tonight. That's like, here's your offer, but we'll tell you if and when we're actually going to take you.
Yeah, and that's the political part, because when kids want to commit sometimes, you're not only going to lose that kid, potentially at least, if you tell them you can't commit right now. Right. The school they go to, the area they're from, that matters. I know Miami staff doesn't worry about where kids are from that much. That's eventually going to cost them with somebody, but they're having top 10 classes too. So it is what it is. Alabama's, like under Saban, ticked off a lot of coaches in the state of Alabama, but they were having a top 3 class every year, so they didn't care. So it is what it is, man. It's kind of funny to follow, but there's some entertainment with it.
Sure is. Well, always entertainment when Brian Smith joins us. You want to make sure you check him out on X at FBScout_Florida. Check out his work alongside mine at allhurricanes.com. Brian, fantastic job. Have a great weekend coming up.
Thank you, sir.
Good stuff as always. Everyone, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. If you want to become a Locked On Canes insider, you can click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. And we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.